Imagine walking into a room and feeling every eye on you. Some are curious, some are envious, some are quietly hostile. Sense it without a single word spoken. The silent verdicts, the invisible measurements, the unasked for evaluations. Most people would shrink. They would try to soften their voice, hide their edges, become more acceptable. But not you, not anymore. In a world that demands women smile to be liked, apologize to be forgiven, and shrink to be safe, you must decide whose voice defines you. Medusa, once a mortal woman, was transformed into something that could not be looked at without consequence. Her power was not in violence, but in refusal. Refusal to be approached. Refusal to be diminished.
Ice.
Her gaze was a boundary no one could cross without paying the price. The truth is, other people's judgments are not mirrors. They are projections. What they see in you often says more about them than about you. And yet we've been trained from childhood to edit ourselves according to the imagined jury of strangers. This constant self-surveillance is a quiet prison, and it is built entirely in your mind. Stoic philosophy teaches that only two things are truly in your control: your thoughts and your actions. The rest, including the judgments of others, belongs to the realm of what you cannot command. To obsess over it is to hand over the keys to your own freedom. Medusa did not negotiate her right to exist, simply stood as she was, unblinking, unbent. The day you stop letting other people's opinions define you is the day you reclaim your life. Da-da-da-da-da. This is not about arrogance. It's about sovereignty. It's about looking back at the world, as Medusa did, and deciding, I will not be reduced. If you are here, it means you are tired of living under the weight of other people's opinions. You're tired of measuring your worth by someone else's scale. Tired of feeling small because of whispers, stares, or online comments. This space is for women who want to reclaim their self-definition. Women who, like Medusa, are ready to become untouchable in the face of judgment. In this journey, we will explore how the Medusa archetype can serve as a psychological shield, not through isolation from the world, but through mastery over your own mind. We will bring together the grounded wisdom of Stoic philosophy and practical psychology so you can stop chasing approval and start living with clarity, dignity, and unwavering boundaries. You will see that what truly matters is not what they think of you, but how you think of yourself. This is more than a conversation, it's training for your inner fortress. Each chapter will offer you deep insights, real-world examples, and concrete practices to help you dismantle the invisible cage of other people's expectations. By the end, you will not just understand the power of Medusa's gaze, you will have built it within yourself. Before we begin, take a second to support this work. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with women who need this message. And leave a comment below telling me your country and city I want to know where this movement of self-defined women is growing. Your voice matters here, and your story might inspire someone else to begin their own transformation. Let's step into this together. The world will keep looking. Let them. Our work is to look back, steady, unbroken, and unafraid. You have probably been judged more times than you can count for your appearance, your choices, your relationships, your career. Even for the way you speak or stay silent. Judgment is a constant companion in modern life, amplified by social media and the culture of public commentary. Every action, every photo, every opinion seems to invite unsolicited evaluation. And because these judgments are often tied too deeply, ingrained social expectations, they can feel personal, piercing, and difficult to ignore. The first step in freeing yourself from this invisible weight is understanding what judgment truly is. In psychology, judgment from others is often less about objective truth and more about projection. People carry their own insecurities, biases, and desires, and they project these onto others as a way to affirm their worldview. When someone calls you too much or not enough, it's usually because your existence challenges their comfort zone. Recognizing this truth does not mean dismissing feedback entirely, but it does mean separating useful input from emotional noise. The Stoics understood this principle long before modern psychology named it. Epictetus taught that it is not events themselves that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. Applied here, it's not the judgment itself that causes harm, but the meaning we attach to it. If you can shift your interpretation, you take back your power. You stop treating every opinion as a verdict and start seeing it as a reflection of the other person's mind. Medusa embodies this shift. In myth, her gaze turned onlookers to stone, but this can be read as a metaphor for the power of unshakable self-possession. She does not run, argue, or justify herself. She looks directly, unmoved, and the other freezes, not because she has destroyed them, but because they cannot penetrate her composure. In practice, adopting Medusa's stance requires mental training. You must build the habit of pausing before reacting to a judgment. When someone criticizes or labels you, instead of rushing to defend or explain, take a breath. Ask yourself, is this opinion based on truth, or is it a projection? Does this belong to me or to them? A small pause is the beginning of emotional sovereignty. It also requires boundaries. One of the most harmful effects of constantly absorbing judgments is that it erodes your ability to define yourself. If you take in every opinion as truth, you will spend your life in a constant state of self-editing. Boundaries are not only physical, they are mental. You have the right to decide which voices enter your inner space. Sometimes that means limiting exposure to certain people or environments. Other times it means creating a mental filter so their words pass through without taking root. A helpful exercise is what I call the circle of relevance. Write down the names of people whose opinions truly matter to you, not because they flatter you, but because they know you deeply, respect you, and want your growth. This list should be short, perhaps only a handful of names. Everyone else's opinion falls outside the circle. When a judgment comes from outside this circle, remind yourself, this voice has no authority over my self-definition. Another essential skill is reframing. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, uses reframing to help clients see situations from a different perspective. For example, instead of thinking they think I'm cold, you might reframe it as, they are uncomfortable with my boundaries. Instead of, they think I'm selfish, you could reframe it as, they are not used to a woman prioritizing her own needs. Reframing does not deny the existence of judgment. It strips it of its sting and places it in context. We must also address the emotional side. Even with all the logic in the world, being judged can hurt, especially when it comes from people you care about. Here, Stoicism offers another tool, the distinction between what is up to us and what is not. You cannot control their perception, but you can control your response. You can decide to maintain your dignity even in the face of misunderstanding. This is where Medusa's lesson becomes personal. She does not fight to be liked. She fights to remain whole. One trap to avoid is overcompensation. Sometimes, in an effort to prove we are unaffected by judgment, we swing to arrogance or detachment. But true freedom from others' opinions does not require defiance. It requires neutrality. You don't have to prove them wrong. You simply have to remain yourself. This is harder than it sounds because ego will want to react. But ego-driven reactions keep you tethered to their opinion. You are still dancing to their music, even if in protest. The final point is consistency. The power of Medusa's gaze is not in one dramatic moment, but in her unwavering stance. If you want to be free from the weight of others' judgments, you must practice self-definition daily. Decide who you are, based on your values, and act in alignment with that decision, regardless of who is watching. This is the core of authenticity, and authenticity is unshakable when it is built on self-respect. When you reach this level of self-possession, something remarkable happens. Judgments lose their grip. They become background noise instead of controlling narratives. You move through the world with the same quiet certainty as Medusa, unafraid of the gaze of others because you know exactly who you are, and that in a society obsessed with approval is nothing less than revolutionary. Judgment becomes a prison when you start believing it is a reflection of absolute truth. But here's the reality. No one sees you as you truly are. They see you through the lens of their own experiences, fears, and desires. It is like looking through a distorted mirror. What appears is not a perfect reflection, but a filtered, altered version of you. The tragedy is that many women shape their lives around these distorted reflections, trying endlessly to correct something that was never accurate in the first place. The first freedom is the realization that perception is not reality. In philosophy, this is called subjectivity. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, reminded himself daily that the opinions of others are just that, opinions. Not laws, they are not unshakable facts, and they certainly are not definitions of your worth. This mental shift is crucial because it transforms judgment from an emotional blow into something you can observe with detachment. Medusa's myth offers a striking image for this detachment. Her power was not to chase her critics, but to stand unyielding. In psychological terms, this represents the power of non-engagement. You do not have to respond to every provocation. Silence, when intentional, is not weakness, it is control. And control over your own reaction is the most powerful form of independence. However, non-engagement is not about ignoring reality, it is about choosing where to invest your energy. In modern life, this means understanding that every reaction costs you something: time, focus, and emotional balance. The more you react to irrelevant opinions, the less you have left for your true goals. Just as a warrior conserves their strength for the real battle, you must conserve yours for the things that genuinely matter. A practical tool here is the reaction audit. Each time you feel the sting of judgment, pause and ask, if I respond, what do I gain? If I stay silent, what do I preserve? This short mental check can save you from countless unnecessary conflicts and keep your focus where it belongs, on living by your own standards. Boundaries play a central role in this process. Not everyone should have access to your personal story, your vulnerabilities, or your decision-making process. Selective disclosure is a psychological shield. If someone has proven that their judgments are careless or toxic, they do not deserve more material to twist. This does not mean hiding your life out of fear. It means choosing to share with those who can handle your truth responsibly. In therapy, women often struggle with the guilt of setting such boundaries, fearing they will be perceived as cold or arrogant. But here's where Medusa's symbolism offers a lesson. Your boundaries may make some uncomfortable, but that discomfort is theirs to manage, not yours to fix. The fear of being called unapproachable keeps many women trapped in a cycle of overexposure. Remember, accessibility is not the same as kindness, and constant availability is not the same as value. There's also a deeper layer to the fear of judgment, the fear of exclusion. As social beings, we are wired to want acceptance because, in ancient times, belonging to a group was essential for survival. Today, this survival instinct manifests as social anxiety and the need for approval. But here's the paradox. In trying to please everyone, you often end up pleasing no one, and losing yourself in the process. The only way out is to accept that rejection is inevitable, but self-betrayal is optional. The Stoics prepared themselves for criticism by practicing what they called premeditatio malorum, imagining possible hardships before they happened. You can use this technique by rehearsing in your mind the worst judgments someone could make about you, and then deciding in advance how you will respond. By doing this, you remove the shock factor and weaken the emotional impact. When the real moment comes, you are ready, steady, and unshaken. Finally, understand that living without being defined by judgment is not about closing yourself off emotionally. It is about opening your life to what truly matters and closing the door on noise. Medusa's gaze is a metaphor for the clarity you gain when you stop seeking validation. You see people's words for what they are, reflections of their own minds, not verdicts on your soul. And in that clarity, you find freedom, the kind of freedom that makes you unrecognizable to your old self, untouchable to those who once tried to define you. Living free from the weight of others' judgments requires cultivating a strong internal compass. Many women navigate life by looking outward, checking for signals of approval, trying to measure themselves against shifting standards. This outward orientation is exhausting because it is never stable. Society, peers, even loved ones can change their opinions on a whim. The internal compass, by contrast, relies on personal values, clarity of purpose, and a deep understanding of self. It is the foundation of resilience, and it is precisely what Medusa represents in her archetypal form. To develop this internal compass, the first step is self-knowledge. You must be brutally honest with yourself about your values, your limits, and your goals. Stoics called this knowing your own soul. Write down what is non-negotiable for you, your standards, your boundaries, the principles by which you choose to live. When judgment arises, you will then have a fixed reference point to measure against. Does this opinion align with my values, or is it irrelevant? Self-reflection is another key practice. Journaling can help you identify recurring patterns of judgment that trigger emotional responses. Ask yourself, whose judgments affect me most? Why? What emotions do they stir? Often you will find that the most painful judgments touch unresolved fears from your past. By recognizing this, you can separate present reality from old conditioning. Assertiveness is the outward expression of this inner work. Medusa did not retreat. She asserted her boundaries with unwavering presence. Assertiveness is not aggression. It is a clear communication of your limits and intentions without apology or defensiveness. In practical terms, this might mean saying no to requests that compromise your energy, speaking up in meetings without preemptively softening your language or ending interactions that drain you emotionally. Each act of assertiveness reinforces your sovereignty. Another essential component is emotional regulation. Being unshaken by judgment does not mean being cold or indifferent. It means responding with control rather than reaction. Techniques from modern psychology, such as mindfulness and cognitive restructuring, are powerful here. When a critical remark arises, pause, observe your initial emotional surge, and then consciously choose your response. This practice strengthens your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making and impulse control, and builds what Stoics called inner fortitude. Visualization is a tool used by both athletes and leaders, and it can be applied here. Imagine yourself in situations where judgment would normally provoke anxiety or self-doubt. See yourself standing tall, unshaken, and responding in alignment with your values. Over time, this mental rehearsal rewires your emotional responses, making it easier to maintain composure in real life. It is also vital to cultivate a support network that reinforces your independence rather than undermines it. Seek relationships with people who respect boundaries, who celebrate authenticity, and who challenge you intellectually without diminishing your self-worth. This does not mean surrounding yourself only with agreement. Healthy friction is necessary for growth. But the voices that shape your internal narrative should primarily be those that empower, not diminish your sense of self. The media and social environments add layers of complexity. Constant exposure to curated lives and opinions can distort self-perception and amplify judgment. Curate your environment deliberately. Limit social media that triggers comparison. Engage with content that inspires reflection, resilience, and agency. Medusa's archetype can guide this process, just as she did not allow others' gazes to dictate her existence. You too can control the inputs you permit into your mind. Finally, integrate these practices into daily rituals. Begin each day, reaffirming your values. Review your boundaries and remind yourself of your non-negotiables. Moments of judgment, consciously apply your pause, reflect, and reframe techniques. Over time, these behaviors solidify into habits, and habits form character. The woman who emerges from this practice is no longer vulnerable to the whims of others' opinions. She is anchored in her own authority, and some Chapter 3 emphasizes. That freedom from judgment is an ongoing practice, a combination of introspection, assertiveness, emotional regulation, and deliberate environmental choices. Medusa's archetype serves as a constant reminder that self-possession and unwavering presence are not only possible, but essential. By internalizing this archetype and applying practical psychological strategies, you can navigate a judgmental world with clarity, dignity, and resilience. One of the greatest challenges in freeing yourself from judgment is managing the emotional residue it leaves behind. Even when intellectually we know that other people's opinions do not define us, emotions often linger. Anxiety, self-doubt, shame, these are the invisible chains that keep many women tethered to approval. The first step toward liberation is recognizing these emotions without judgment. You do not have to act on them or let them control you, but you must acknowledge them honestly. Stoicism provides a framework for this process. Marcus Aurelius advised that we should observe our thoughts and feelings as a detached witness. Much like an astronomer observes the stars, emotions are signals, not commands. When a critical comment or judgment arises, identify it as an emotion, perhaps irritation, hurt, or fear, and note it objectively. Naming the feeling reduces its power and allows you to respond rationally rather than react impulsively. Medusa's archetype is invaluable here. She embodies the capacity to stand unshaken even when provoked or misunderstood. Her gaze is a metaphor for self-possession in the face of external chaos. Psychologically, this represents the ability to maintain composure and clarity even when confronted with criticism or hostility. Practicing this requires building emotional resilience, the capacity to withstand pressure, without compromising your internal stability. A practical technique is emotional journaling. When you feel hurt by judgment, write down the incident, the emotions it triggered, and your initial impulses. Then, analyze whether the judgment is rooted in truth, projection, or misunderstanding. This separation of facts from feelings allows you to see the event clearly and to choose a measured response. Over time, this builds an internal buffer that prevents others' opinions from dictating your sense of self. Another key strategy is developing cognitive reframing skills. This involves consciously interpreting events in a way that reduces emotional harm. For example, if a colleague dismisses your idea, you might reframe it as, "Their response reflects their perspective, not my competence." This small mental shift preserves your self-esteem and reinforces the boundary between your identity and external judgment.
Boundaries
Also remains central. Establishing clear limits on how much influence others' opinions have on your behavior is crucial. This might mean limiting interactions with people who habitually criticize, or it may mean disengaging from online platforms where judgment is rampant. Boundaries are not rejection of connection, they are protection of your mental space. It is important to combine these internal strategies with external actions that reinforce your autonomy. Assertive communication, consistent routines, and selective sharing of personal information all serve to fortify your independence. Each action reinforces the message to yourself and to others. Your value is intrinsic, not contingent on approval. Reflection on past experiences can also illuminate patterns of vulnerability. Identify moments when judgment impacted your choices or self-perception and analyze why. Often, repeated emotional responses reveal unresolved fears or ingrained social conditioning. By confronting these patterns consciously, you reduce their unconscious influence. Meditative practices, such as focused breathing or mindful observation, further support emotional stability. These practices strengthen the capacity to remain present and grounded, even when faced with criticism. They provide a physiological and psychological anchor that allows you to respond rather than react. Finally, cultivate gratitude and self-recognition. Celebrate small victories in emotional regulation and self-possession. Each time you maintain composure in the face of judgment, you reinforce the neural pathways associated with confidence and autonomy. Over time, this creates a resilient mindset, one in which external opinions are data points rather than verdicts, and where your internal sense of worth remains intact. Chapter 4 emphasizes that emotional mastery is not suppression, but management. By acknowledging feelings, observing them objectively, and practicing strategic responses, you can maintain composure, integrity, and authenticity in the face of judgment. Medusa's archetype serves as a guide, a model of inner strength, unyielding presence and self-possession, showing that a woman can be fully herself, even in a world that seeks to define her. The final step in mastering your response to judgment is integrating all the lessons of the previous chapters into a cohesive daily practice. Freedom from external evaluation is not a one-time achievement, is a continual process that requires vigilance, reflection, and deliberate action. The archetype of Medusa provides both inspiration and structure, unwavering presence, clear boundaries, and mastery over one's emotional state. Begin each day with intentional self-reflection. Ask yourself, what are my values today? Judgments or expectations do I consciously choose to disregard? This morning ritual aligns your actions with your principles and sets the tone for the day. Writing these reflections in a journal reinforces the habit and provides a tangible record of growth over time. Next, practice selective attention. The world is filled with commentary, some useful, much irrelevant. Train your mind to notice judgment without internalizing it. In cognitive behavioral terms, this is called decentering, seeing thoughts as events in the mind, not truths that define reality. A dismissive remark from a colleague, a social media critique, or a family member's disapproval are data points, not verdicts. Treat them as observations, not definitions. Enforcement remains central. Assess your interactions daily and make decisions about where to invest your energy. Avoid conversations or situations that consistently erode your self-respect. Speak your truth when necessary, but do not over-explain. Medusa's power lay in her clarity of presence. She did not justify, debate, or negotiate her right to exist. Each day, practice this non-negotiable clarity in small ways, whether in personal relationships, work settings, or online spaces. Another critical practice is emotional rehearsal. Imagine scenarios that typically trigger self-doubt or anxiety, and visualize yourself responding with composure, assertiveness, and neutrality. This mental rehearsal strengthens your ability to maintain equilibrium in real situations. It also conditions the mind to react intentionally rather than impulsively, reinforcing the distinction between your inner self and external projections. Regular reflection on past judgments enhances insight. Identify patterns of reaction and moments where you felt unnecessarily swayed by opinions. Analyze why and develop strategies to prevent similar emotional responses in the future. Over time, you will notice reduced sensitivity to criticism and a heightened sense of personal sovereignty. Stoic exercises, such as journaling about things outside your control, complement these practices. Make a daily note of judgments encountered. Categorize them as relevant or irrelevant, and consciously release the irrelevant ones. This cultivates mental clarity and reduces cognitive load. Engage in mindful solitude. Medusa's strength is tied to her ability to stand alone without compromise. Carve out time each day for introspection, free from external influence. Solitude is not isolation. It is a space to reinforce your identity, process emotions, and strengthen mental resilience. Community remains important, but choose it wisely. Surround yourself with individuals who respect boundaries, celebrate authenticity, and challenge you constructively. True empowerment grows in the balance between internal sovereignty and supportive connections, not in constant social validation. Daily affirmation is a powerful reinforcement tool. Statements like, "I define myself. Others' opinions do not dictate my worth," internalize the principles discussed in these chapters. Repetition solidifies neural pathways associated with confidence, self-possession, and autonomy. Finally, measure progress not by external validation, but by your own sense of alignment and integrity. Medusa's archetype teaches that being unshakable is not a public performance, it is an internal state. Each day, assess how well you maintained composure, honored your boundaries, and acted in accordance with your values. Celebrate these victories and view missteps as opportunities for continued growth. Chapter 5 underscores that liberation from judgment is a lived, daily practice. Through reflection, boundary enforcement, emotional regulation, and strategic engagement, you can cultivate a mindset in which external opinions lose power. Medusa's archetype provides both the model and the inspiration, a woman fully present, grounded in her values and unwavering in her self-definition. Integrating these strategies, you become a living testament to psychological sovereignty, demonstrating that true freedom is cultivated from within. Freedom from judgment is not a destination. It is a continuous practice. Every day presents opportunities to test your boundaries, regulate your emotions, and reaffirm your internal compass. Like Medusa, you stand unshaken, not by denying the world's gaze, but by choosing how it affects you. Your worth is not measured by approval or criticism. It is defined by your values, integrity, and self-possession. Remember, emotional sovereignty is cultivated through small, consistent actions, pausing before reacting, reframing judgments, asserting boundaries, and reflecting on your inner responses. These practices transform vulnerability into strength, fear into clarity, and judgment into a neutral observation. Each moment you resist being defined by others' opinions, you reinforce your independence and deepen your understanding of self. As you move forward, carry Medusa's lesson with you: unwavering presence, deliberate action, and unshakable self-definition. Engage with the world authentically, protect your mental space, and allow only meaningful voices to influence your inner life. In doing so, you do not merely survive in a judgmental society, you thrive. You become the embodiment of strength, clarity, and freedom. A living declaration that no external opinion can dictate who you are.